Whenever we can, wherever we can, we're talking hoops. And you know our guys will ramble.
Can you just email me the rest of this story?
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson.
Dickinson's an underrated talent, 100%.
On KNBR 104.5 and 6.8, streaming live at KNBR.com and on the KNBR app.
How much gas does Steph have in the tank?
He works so hard in that third quarter. His post gets it.
Quentin Post 4 made threes. Moody 4 made threes. Keith Santos 4 made threes. All going Steph's 4 made threes. He's celebrating and he plays with an edge too. He's firing. He's excited out there.
Welcome in. Good Saturday morning to you. It is Just Dubs with John Dickinson here on KNBR. 808 KNBR, the number 415-808-5627 as we come to you each and every Saturday morning here as we get on into January and approaching February. Man, incredible. The All-Star Weekend going to be at Chase Center and over at Oracle in Oakland here in 3 weeks from this weekend, and the trade deadline now less than 2 weeks away. This season is moving fast here for the Golden State Warriors and in the NBA, and it's a pleasure to be with you again here for the next couple of hours on this Saturday as we talk all things Golden State Warriors. We talk all things NBA with you here on the Sports Leader. Appreciate everybody that begins to file in on YouTube and Twitch and the KNBR live stream as well. We'll get to many of the comments from folks who like to keep the show as interactive as possible here on Saturday mornings, and also lay out for you the fact that we got a busy day of Dubs coverage on the Sports Leader with the Warriors and Lakers going at it tonight for the second time here in San Francisco this season. Of course, these two teams playing back on Christmas night, a game won by the Lakers in the closing seconds, and they play again tonight, ABC Saturday Night Showcase game. And a big one with the Lakers coming in as the 5th seed at 24-18 in the Western Conference, and the Warriors still on the outside looking in terms of the Western Conference play in and playoff race. It's amazing how a couple of games can change everything as far as teams moving up or down. But the Lakers are currently 5th right now in the Western Conference. The Warriors 3 games back, but would not even be a play-in tournament team at this particular point in time. 22-22, trailing the likes of Phoenix, who comes in and will take on the Warriors between this show this morning and next Saturday's show, the Suns at Chase Center, coming up this coming Friday. And then Sacramento, a team that has beaten the Warriors a couple of times in January, including this past week, as the Dubs losing a game where they really played well in a lot of phases, but too many turnovers down the stretch in that one. And the Kings able to steal that one late after the Warriors had a 17-point lead. The Timberwolves and Mavs are still teams that the Warriors are chasing. I think the Timberwolves and Mavs, two of the biggest disappointments among teams in the NBA in the early part of the year, and now on into the midpoint of the year and the second half of the year. It's not early anymore across the NBA. And what do the Warriors do at the trade deadline? Always a big topic of discussion, and a topic that, as you relate it back to everything that's been going on for the last week, do the events of the last week play a role in what ultimately the Warriors do or don't do at the trade deadline? We've been discussing this for weeks, and we've got a couple of more weeks to go here in the lead up to the trade deadline, which is on February 6th. So the Warriors still have games tonight, and then 4 more on the homestand after tonight. So 1-0 now with the victory over the Bulls on the 6-game homestand. So 5 games to go, plus another game in Utah before the trade deadline. Can this team make a little bit of a push to separate and maybe get into the conversation where they're closer to 7 or 6? And some kind of a move at the deadline would really be beneficial to help augment and help this roster. As you start to look at some of the big storylines from the last week, however, for the Warriors, and of course, as we sat here a week ago at this very time, the Warriors were 20-20. They were 20-20, and now they're 22-22. We were talking about Jordan Poole and his second return a week ago. Warriors able to win that game unimpressively to improve to +1 to 500, and then Golden State with one of the more embarrassing defeats on the MLK Holiday afternoon game against the Celtics. By the way, a Celtics team still among the best in the NBA, but a Celtics team that's really been reeling on this trip that they're on. They've basically been a 500 team for the better part of a month. The Lakers smoked them the other night. I mean, it's not a team that exactly is playing championship level basketball, even though you look up and the Celtics still have the 31-14 record. But the best the Celtics have looked in the last month was against the Warriors on Monday afternoon at Chase Center, and the Warriors with their worst home loss in 40 years against the Celtics. Got to go all the way back to 1985. And so, all right, seemingly all of these 2-game segments end up with the Warriors 1-1 in a 2-game segment, 2-2 in a 4-game segment, 3-3 now in a 6-game segment. That's really what it's been now. As you look at the layout of the year, the Warriors had maybe overperformed to a big level at 12-3 through the first 15. Then they were 3-12 in the next 15. As great as they had played, they played just that awfully over the next 15-game stretch to get to the 30-game mark exactly at 15-15. And now you look at the last 14-game stretch. Tonight will be 15, and they have been exactly 7-7 in that stretch. So they'll either be 8-7 with a win tonight, 7-8 with a loss tonight to the Lakers. And so you add it up, it's been 3, if you break it down into 15-game stretches, it's been exceptional. It's been horrific. And here in the third 15-game stretch, it's been basically what Steph Curry said a few weeks ago, just mid. Just mid. They're mid, and you add it all up, and this team is mid. And they go to Sacramento, had a really good game plan against the Kings, who you knew were going to try to double and take the ball out of Steph Curry's hands. And with the Warriors so shorthanded, dare anybody else to beat them. And the Warriors had a really nice game plan as far as beating the double and ball movement into wide open threes and really trying to play fast against a Sacramento team that had played better defensively. But they, for a majority of that game, made the Kings look kind of like the Kings that they've been the last 2.5, 3 years in terms of just bad defense, wide open threes, getting whatever you want at the rim, but too many turnovers. And the game got sped up. And the Warriors maybe getting a few 2 minutes of contributing time to some players that aren't ready to be playing as much as they were forced to play. And while played well for portions of the game, it's a tough ask for 48 minutes against a team. And the Kings, to their credit, have been playing as well as any team in the NBA here over the last 3-4 weeks. To get themselves back in the conversation to where they were. I mean, they were in the dregs. They were closer to Portland in 13th than they were to 5th or 6th in the Western Conference. And now they find themselves ahead of the Warriors, 2 games over 500 after being 6 games under 500. And now very much a team that's going to be reckoned with as far as the play-in tournament for sure, but maybe even looking to try and get the 6 seed or the 5 seed, as the Lakers and Clippers currently holding at 6 over 500. So there has been a little bit of a separation. You look at OKC as atop everybody in the West, and then Houston and Memphis, I think the two, I don't want to say surprise teams, but the teams that have significantly improved off of where they have been the last couple of years. Memphis kind of getting back as they had gotten healthier and gone through their little retool. And then you look at the Rockets, and they are a team that was on the outside looking in a year ago, but felt that they had a lot of young talent and would continue to grow, and they have. So the Rockets and Grizzlies, a couple of teams that were both beneath the Warriors last year, that are 2-3 in the conference. Denver got off to kind of a janky start, but they've been playing excellent basketball. They're 12 over. So there really is OKC, and then that next tier, which is 2, 3, and 4, Rockets, Grizzlies, Nuggets. Lakers and Clippers right now are kind of in their own tier, a little bit separated, couple of games separated from the Dallas and Minnesota. And I think, Dallas and Minnesota are two teams that thought they'd be in the Houston and Memphis category, and maybe that the Rockets and Grizzlies would be down in the 7-8 holes with Sacramento. Phoenix, I think, thought they were going to be more like maybe the Lakers and the Clippers at a minimum, as did the Warriors. Funny, those teams with the aging stars, right? The Lakers, Clippers, it's kind of it's 4 of the 5 teams in the Pacific Division. I was going to say kind of their own division, Lakers, Clippers, Suns, and Warriors, but that's 4/5 of the Pacific Division, with the Kings a little bit less of a veteran team when it comes to their best players. Obviously, some younger, more prime best players in Sabonis and Fox and others, although DeRozan's up there. But yeah, you've got the LeBron, KD, Steph, Kawhi led groups, with the Clippers and the Lakers, and those two teams have done better than the Suns and the Warriors have had down at the bottom of the conference. So what can be done to where the Warriors will look to make an impactful move here? And how do the events of the last week and who has stepped up? We'll get into Quentin Post. We'll get into Guy Santos. 808 KNBR 415-808-5627. That is the number to jump in and join the conversation. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and Twitch as well. Erwin Kwong in early. Atco Pest Control, great to see you there. Alex and others beginning to file in. Andis Brown, one of our faves as well, as we're going to be with you here until noon. Quick timeout. We'll come back. 808 KNBR. We'll get into some of the storylines from the week as they relate to the Warriors and as they relate to the trade deadline right here on Just Dubs with JD on the Sports Leader.
This is KNBR, and this is Just Dubs with John Dickinson, streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
Shot clock at 1 with a floater with finger rolls. And Looney playing volleyball. Keith Santos back it out again. Key for 3. This guy's unreal. Another new career high.
Yeah, Keith Santos contributing back-to-back games with career highs against Chicago and Sacramento. And how about 9 of 11 from 3 over the last 2 games for Guy Santos, helping the Warriors have a chance to win the game against the Kings on Wednesday night before Golden State faltered down the stretch, and helping the Warriors turn the game on Thursday against Chicago into a blowout after a really poor start. Warriors were down 14 early. It was 20-6. You're thinking, oh, man, feel-good loss against Sacramento, and then you can't come home even with Stephen Curry playing in a back-to-back for the first time in 2 months. Just no energy, starting lineup that didn't have it, but the bench, and in particular, a couple of guys who are really at the back end of that bench, and Guy Santos, basically the 14th man, and a guy in Quentin Post on a two-way contract. You're what, 14th and 15th guys on the roster at this point, helping you win a regular season game in January against a Chicago team that's dreadful and should probably tear the whole operation down to the studs. We'll see if they do. We'll see if the Warriors are going to participate in that. But some new contributors for the Warriors here as they go 2-2 over the last week, 22-22 overall. We're back here. It's Just Dubs with JD, John Dickinson, on the Sports Leader, 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. And yeah, Guy Santos, 19 against Chicago, as we mentioned, 16 against Sacramento. He has played essentially for the last 2 weeks, going back to Detroit on January the 9th. He got 26 minutes in that one. There was the game where the Warriors rested Stephen Curry, second of the back-to-back in Indiana. He played in that game that the Warriors kept cosmetically competitively close in Indiana. Then didn't really play well at Toronto, was impactful, hit a 3 at Minnesota in the win, didn't play a lot against Washington, but then the last 3 games has played significantly more to varying degrees. Didn't play well really against Boston, but has shown himself to be here in a number of these games in January where he's got an opportunity to play, having a skill set that can help the Warriors a little bit, at least maintain an ability to be competitive. And I think the 2 big takeaways, and we can get into the individual performances of Santos and Quentin Post, who had his breakout game against Chicago on Thursday, although was also a contributor in the game in Sacramento, really helped the Warriors with Kevon Looney ill, and just a different element, somebody that could step out and confidently knock down a 3. And the Warriors have internally discussed and outwardly discussed just the impact that having that stretch big can have. I think it's a big part of the reason why you look at the interest in Nikola Vucevic of Chicago, who had an underwhelming game against the Warriors, even after getting off to a really good start with the 7 points in the early going, ended up finishing with 9 and didn't have much impact on the game. That's kind of the negative of Vucevic. I mean, there are some games, even though he's somebody that's averaging over 20, there are some games where it just kind of looks like that. He didn't do much. Warriors really attacked him in pick and roll, and he doesn't defend all that well. And he's just kind of out there. That being said, I do think the big takeaways for Quentin Post and Guy Santos are, yes, you can continue to play them for the time being, and I think the Warriors don't have much of a choice but to continue to play both of them, and a different kind of test as you look at the game tonight with the Lakers coming in and some of the size and athleticism and forceful nature by which the Lakers play. Different animal for Guy Santos and Quentin Post than going up against maybe Sacramento, going up against Chicago. So good test for them on the individual front. But for me, it's more the skill set that each of those players possess, I think shows how when they play well, and they play well in the ways that their skills, complement the rest of the roster, it shows that while they may not specifically be the answer over the longer haul, to me, what it shows is having a 3-4 man that can consistently knock down some shots. And we don't know that Guy Santos necessarily can do it consistently, but having a hustle wing that'll get on the floor and dive for loose balls, but just make an open shot. I think that's the thing that's the bigger and more important part about it. Having that player it opens everything up for the Warriors. It just makes the whole thing seem more fluid. And I think that's maybe the biggest takeaway, even though this has been a different version of the same this week for the Warriors being 2-2. I think the last 2 games specifically, it's just felt a little fresher. It's felt a little like it's not the same guys making the same mistakes over and over, and you win one game and you lose one game, but you don't feel great about the win. And the losses are, I think the loss to Sacramento, I still think if you're the Warriors, one in line with how many 5, 6, 8 games this year that have seemingly gone the exact same direction. But we can get into the impact of what Quentin Post can be. And again, I don't want to anoint anybody off of really 2, I would say, meaningful games. He played against Boston, had 9 points, but that was a game where the Warriors were getting smoked. Played a little bit against Indiana, and that was a game where the main veteran players were either injured or being rested. So I don't take much away from those games or the couple of minutes that he got in December, a couple of games late against the Clippers and Cavs. So it's really we're talking about really 2 games for Quentin Post. So you don't want to overreact and say, hey, this is what this guy can be and this and that and the other. But he does, I think, provide a skill, much like Guy Santos in his own way, that the Warriors lack. The Warriors lack true shooting big man, a stretch big, and they haven't really had it since Otto Porter and Nemanja Bjelica. But this is a legitimate 7-footer that's doing it. And he's 24 years old, going to be 25 coming up in March before the end of this season in 2 months. And he is somebody that he plays physically. He's not soft. I think you like that about him. He's a good screen setter. I think you like that about him. Seemingly has a nice feel for being a good passer. I like that. And unafraid to just step out as he did against Chicago and take 10 threes if he's going to get the opportunity. In 20 minutes, he took 10 threes and knocked down 5 of them. So I think you got to like that. And you look at him through these last 4 games in January where he's gotten more of an opportunity to play, and he's shooting 40% from 3 in January. So he's basically been a 2 for 5 average if you through these 4 games. And so, yeah, you look at that, and I think you like it. 8 for 20 in January in limited minutes over the course of 4 games, and I think you would take the 40%. Can he come in and knock down a couple in a game and keep it moving and spread the floor? And look, you made a great pass to Andrew Wiggins for a dunk in the game. So whether you think Quentin Post is the guy, and I think the immediate projection or question, let's not get carried away here for a guy like Quentin Post, is can he be a solid, capable backup big? Because, and we'll get into just how the Warriors have to adjust the rotation accordingly, and guys are going to be coming back, and what does it mean for Trace Jackson Davis? Do they make a move? Like, we'll get into all of that here between now and noon on the Sports Leader. But I think we need to, that skill set watching Quentin Post do what Quentin Post has done in a couple of games and the impact that it's had on the individual games really, I think, tells you why the Warriors are so interested in somebody like Vucevic to begin with, and why they've been so adamant, even though they haven't gone out and acquired anybody, but adamant that that type of player is really the number one thing that's lacking aside from a second star on the roster. Do they look to make a move? Does Quentin Post become the move between now and the end of the regular season in terms of that specific player that has that specific skill set? Because obviously Quentin Post is a two-way player. You don't have to do anything. You've already got him. You don't have to give up a couple of second-round picks. You don't have to give up any salary filler or anything to go get him. Obviously, Vucevic is a much better and more established player for that skill set. But I think you look at it, and you can just see having somebody that does what he does, how it impacts this team positively. And similar to Guy Santos, the Warriors don't have any 3-4 men that just stripe it from three, that just line it up and knock it down. Wiggins doesn't do that. Moses Moody doesn't do that consistently. Kuminga doesn't do that consistently. Moody is up and down with it. There are times where Moody does it. He's done it a little bit more lately. But just having that guy that's a 3-4, that his main objective is make shots. And I maybe we would quibble. Some would say, well, no, Guy Santos, the main thing that he does is hustle and get on the floor and go after loose balls and those kinds of things. Okay, that's fair. But the thing that makes Guy Santos playable is the fact that Guy Santos has been able to make shots, and he's done it at a 50% clip from three-point range in January. So he's been somebody that obviously that's on the high end, but I've said this, I think Guy Santos could be somebody that's a 40% shooter at a decent, like that's a target for him, but it's another element. And it just gets back to, for me, whether these guys are the answer or not. And in the short term, I think they can be, as the Warriors look to evaluate here. I mean, they don't have much of a choice. Unless you're going to make a deal now, the Warriors don't have much of a choice but to look at these young players with other guys out. But it's indicative of, hey, why don't you, if Quentin Post isn't going to be the longer-term answer, then it absolutely is beneficial to go get somebody that has that skill set. If Guy Santos isn't going to be the longer-term answer, and he may very well not be, in fact, more likely not to be than be, then why don't you go get yourself a 3-4 man that can complement Wiggins and complement even Jonathan Kuminga and just knock down some shots to open some things up. So how does it all lay out as it relates to this roster as it gets more healthy and what the Warriors look to do at the trade deadline? Because the big debate has been, and we talked about it a lot last week, the Warriors aren't mortgaging the future. We know that. They're not giving up first-round picks really for anybody, I don't think, unless that player is a bona fide star. Is that the right move? Is that the wrong move? And then what becomes the objective of a successful final 38-game series? This team sits at 22 and 22. Does it become more of an evaluation mode of the young players? Does it become still continue to look to fight to try to get to 6, which is very much within range? And how well does this team have to play to push the front office and ownership in particular to being more willing to be aggressive, even if that means not giving up future first-round picks, because you don't want to give up future first-round picks that you might want to put in a deal for the big-ticket item that you really need, which is that second scorer and true star-type player that would fit next to Steph Curry and potentially Draymond Green moving forward. So 808 KNBR 415-808-5627. We'll continue the conversation there. We'll pause briefly here and come back on this Saturday. It's Just Dubs with JD on the Sports Leader.
live from downtown.
Curry, way downtown. Bang! Bang!
This is Just Dubs with John Dickinson on the Sports Leader, streaming live at KNBR.com and on the KNBR app.
Exactly. Yeah, when you do that, when you move the ball, everybody touch the ball, everybody has a feeling. And everybody gotta, like, when you got the feeling, you're feeling good. If you have one shot, you feel good, like, yeah, I'm gonna make this shot. You can see Moses. You see, like, shoot it. He then the ball barely leave his hand, and he was looking around already. That happened when, like, the ball is moving, everybody's touching it, so everybody feel great playing like that.
That's Guy Santos. I'll tell you another thing about the style of play over these last couple of games for Quentin Post and Guy Santos and getting the opportunities. They fit the Warriors system. And you hear Guy talking about the ball movement and how it leads to guys being more confident in their ability to knock down shots because they're in rhythm and it's in the flow. Like that's another statement to the point to those types of players with those types of skill sets make the whole thing function at a higher level, even with some lesser name players. And so the thing that I continue to take away from it is, what if you get some bigger name players that come in with those skill sets, even if they're not stars? But I think the way Quentin Post has played is a tell as to the fact that a guy like Vucevic would come in and be effective and move the needle for the Warriors, maybe more than you would think that he would on the surface. Again, I'm not saying give up a first-round pick to get him. I've been against that for the last couple of weeks. I think that's a big part of the reason why maybe a deal hadn't come to fruition or was farther along at that point. Just the simple fact that you look at the Bulls are holding out, and then we'll see what the actual offers are when you get down to the deadline. You can want a first-round pick, want a first-round pick, want a first-round pick. A month to go, 4 weeks, 3 weeks to go, 2 weeks to go, 10 days to go, 3 days to go. You can want a first-round pick for somebody, but then you get down to 5 minutes to go, and nobody's giving you a first-round pick, and you go, yeah, we'll take 2 seconds. Hey, you know what? We'll take 2 twos. We'll take 3 twos and a swap of a 2, and he's yours, because you get down at the end and you want to be stuck with the guy for another year at $21 million. So I think when push comes to shove, that's where you look at it. And again, the guy that comes to mind, and don't laugh, Kyle, we got Kyle Haar in our San Francisco studios and Ralph Corral's back there, and Bill Lasky as well is in the house. We got a special Giants season preview edition of Extra Innings coming up here after Just Dubs. That's going to be from noon to 2, so make sure you keep it locked here on the Leader for that. Kyle, am I wrong to say, everybody, I guess, from a basketball standpoint, makes me think of this guy because I think he would be such a perfect fit. But I look at Guy Santos and it makes me think of Cam Johnson again. Like a 3-4 man that can shoot even a little bit. And it's like, wow, this offense looks completely different. Even without a second star, it looks completely different. Now, there's still droughts, and the droughts have cost the Warriors games, and you're still going to have to deal with that. But over the longer haul of these games, having somebody at that position specifically that can knock down shots, I think is kind of a game changer, Kyle.
Yeah, I think Guy Santos is Cam Johnson and Quinn Post is Nikola Vucevic. But realistically, I think they're like in the 22 season when Guy Santos is Otto Porter and Quentin Post is Nemanja Bjelica.
Yeah, that's probably more accurate. I think that's probably more accurate. 808 KNBR 415-808-5627. I'm just going to have to come to grips with the fact that the Warriors are not going to get Cam Johnson, as much as I think he would be the best possible fit of any non-star player that would make the most positive impact in the interim. It drives me crazy. And I know he's got to stay healthy, and he hasn't been able to stay healthy, but it's just that young prime shooter that doesn't get crushed on defense to alleviate some of the pressure off of Curry, allow for Wiggins to not have to be the number 2. he compliments Kuminga if Kuminga winds up on the team still. And by the way, there was a little bit of an update this week on Jonathan Kuminga. Steve Kerr telling reporters, I think it was Monday afternoon, that Kuminga is not close to a return. And so I know there was some thought, and his reevaluation date is tomorrow. That was the 4-week mark, I believe, from initial, or the 3-week mark from initially having the injury where they were going to reevaluate him. So maybe we get an update on that today, because the Warriors are going to be off tomorrow and don't play on Monday either, although they'll have a practice, I would imagine, on Monday, and then play Tuesday and Wednesday. And then Anthony Slater on his podcast had mentioned, maybe All-Star break was kind of what he was hearing, like post All-Star break for Kuminga. So that's another 4 weeks. So you think about that, and that week where the Warriors don't play gives ample time for Kuminga to really get healthy and get him, really get ramped up during that week. But you look at, he sustained the injury 3 weeks ago tonight against the Grizzlies. If he's not coming back till after the All-Star break, the first game after the All-Star break is 4 weeks from last night. So he still would be not even halfway from a return at that point, or basically halfway from a return if you use the extra week. So, yeah, Steve when Steve said not close, that immediately put in my head that it's going to be All-Star break in all likelihood, because it comes to a point where you just get so close to it that it's not beneficial when you have the break. It's not beneficial to have somebody come back and push for a couple of games unless they're really, really in a good position, and you're better off just ramping up. If a guy's ready to go with 2 games before the break, it's better to just take the break and make sure he's really ready to go, and you avoid re-injury and all of those kinds of things. So, yeah, that news coupled with what Slater had mentioned on their Warriors Plus Minus podcast, his podcast with Kawakami and our buddy Marcus Thompson and all of that, that it's leaning more like after the All-Star break from what he had been hearing. So more opportunities here for others to be able to play. But yeah, I just look at the skill sets of Guy Santos and Quentin Post, and while those guys might have the potential to be the answer in the short term, the one thing that they are telling the world is just how impactful having players with those specific skill sets can be to aiding this Warriors roster. Now, how do they work Quentin Post and Guy Santos in as this team gets healthier? How do they look to manipulate wanting to get more of a look for those guys with the trade deadline coming up and the potential to consolidate contracts into a player that can keep a couple of slots on the roster open? Because the one thing I will say, as much as we can talk about they need a star isn't available, should they pay a first-round pick for Vucevic? I think the overwhelming majority is no. I'm huge on Cam Johnson. I'd said I'd give up a first-round pick and even maybe Kuminga to make that happen. It sounds like the Nets are looking for a couple of first-round picks at a minimum, which is why at this point, a week ago, it looked like the Kings were in the driver's seat, and there was a report that the Kings hadn't talked to the Nets about Cam Johnson in like a month. Although reportedly, and I think it was both of these were from Mark Stein, longtime ESPN reporter now running his own Substack, basically that the best deal on the board for Cam Johnson a week ago was Kevin Huerter, Trey Lyles, and a first. And I'm thinking, well, the Warriors could beat that deal, couldn't they? I think Herter's got a couple years still left on the deal. Trey Lyles, Sacramento just signed, I think, to a 3 or a 4 year deal to be a bench player after he had a really good year, the year that they played the Warriors in the playoffs. So, and again, I get why a team like Sacramento wouldn't want to be giving up future first-round picks, let alone multiple first-round picks. They've got one tied up to San Antonio down the line for DeRozan, basically. They were able to get DeRozan, but San Antonio got an unprotected, I think it's 2031 first-round pick or pick swap. And so that was for taking on Harrison Barnes' contract, which allowed them the financial flexibility to get DeRozan. So, they may not want to give up more first-round pick capital at this point for somebody that isn't necessarily a star. But I'm just looking at this thing from the Warriors' point of view. And if you're not all of that to say, I get why the Warriors are not in on Cam Johnson because he's not a star and they really only want to give up major assets for a star. And that star right now isn't readily available. I understand that. I'll tell you the one thing, though, the Warriors 100% must look to do at the deadline, even if it's not sexy. We'll tell you what that is coming up next, and we'll get into the YouTube chat as well. 808 KNBR, John Dickinson, Just Dubs, here on 104.5 and 680 The Sports Leader.
Dub Nation, this is the real and inside story on Warriors basketball. Just Dubs with John Dickinson now continues, streaming live at twitch.tv/thesportsleader.
Just opens up the floor, he picks and pops, and that means the other team's big guy has to go with him. And that means that defender's not in the paint. So Steph was the happiest guy in the building tonight. With all that room to work with, the game got a lot easier for all of our guys. So it was really exciting just watching Quentin, but it goes beyond the shooting. It's the feel. You saw the pass he made to Lindy at the end for the three. Like he sees and feels the game, and he's got some toughness to him too. He's a physical 7-footer. He's not he's not a finesse 7-footer. He's a real 7-footer and likes to mix it up. And really exciting to see him playing like that and getting his chance and making the most of it.
Steve Kerr on Quentin Post, back here at Just Dubs with John Dickinson, 808 KNBR here on this Saturday morning. Got a full day of Dubs coverage with Dubs OT tonight from Harmonic Brewing in Thrive City. Warriors and the Lakers are going to be going at it. ABC Saturday Night Showcase, and then we're going to be on from Harmonic in Thrive City. So really looking forward to that. And Bill Lasky's got a special edition of Extra Innings, a little off-season edition. I know the Giants Fan Fest tour is down in the South Bay today as well. So baseball right around the corner. And Lasky will be talking some Giants off-season and looking ahead to spring training, which is about as close to coming to fruition as the NBA All-Star weekend. I think spring training gets going right after the NBA All-Star weekend. So just about 3.5 weeks away down in the desert for the Giants, and they'll be back in action. Every time I hear Steve Kerr, and we'll get to what I demand at a minimum the Warriors do at the trade deadline in just a second, and also the YouTube chat. Appreciate everybody watching on YouTube and Twitch. But Kyle, I got to – every time I hear Steve Kerr talk about Quentin Post, I feel like – and this happened at the Sacramento game, this happened after the Chicago game – it's almost as if he's begging the front office to get a stretch big, like whether it's Vucevic or Olynyk or whoever. But it's almost as if he's like pleading, like, wow, like number 2 scorer, who cares? Steph's just got so much more room to, like, Quentin Post is getting Steph this much more room to operate. Think if you actually went and got a really good player that's experienced. I mean, there just been some undertones here, and I know we've been kind of reading the undertones for the last 6 to 8 weeks on a number of different levels, but I just can't help but hear Steve pleading with ownership in the front office at every turn when I hear him talk about Quentin Post and what he brings to the table.
Yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth. And I think there was a game before the Sacramento game where Quentin Post saw early game action. And after that game, yeah, Kerr said something similar. And it was just like, yeah, this does sound like he really wants a stretch big, and yeah, you took the words right out of my mouth that they're begging for one.
Yeah, I think it was the Indiana game where he only played about 7 minutes in the game where they shut everybody down, and he hit 1 3 in that game and had 6 points. But yeah, it's just you can just see, what having a player that can do that, how it changes the game dramatically for the Warriors, just based on the fact that they haven't had anybody else to do it. So the trade deadline's now less than 2 weeks away. February 6th, it's 12 days away, 2 weeks from Thursday that just passed here 2 days ago. So 12 days away from the NBA trade deadline. And I'm looking at the Warriors roster, and so much of this, and we've gotten into it even in the last segment. All right, no star available, understandable. Not only willing to give up Kuminga and or for future first-round picks for star players. I'll even give on that, understand that philosophy. Don't want to give up a first-round pick for a Vucevic. Maybe don't think a guy like Cam Johnson's worth it for a couple of first-round picks or Kuminga and a pick because he's not a superstar. Okay, I think there's a conversation to be had maybe there, but I'll roll with what's been reported and where the team leans on that. The one thing that I definitely think the Warriors must look to do, though, at a minimum, at the deadline, is look at the prospect of moving all of their expiring money. And because they're not going to have enough to be able to go out and buy a big ticket item by just letting that number expire. But I'm looking at Dennis Schroeder, 13. And I would not have put Dennis Schroeder in the category of somebody that I'd be looking to necessarily move on from by any stretch, but he just has not performed at the level that the Warriors had hoped. And I think even now with Podziemski back, if the better Podziemski plays in the next couple of weeks, if he can get back a little bit closer to that form from last year as opposed to the early part of this year, and I think Podziemski was starting to snap out of it a little bit before he got hurt. But Schroeder has not worked. $13 million for Schroeder. Again, he either has to be productive for you in the final 2 months or you have to look to move him. That's now on the table. $13 million for Schroeder expiring. $9.1 million for Gary Payton II expiring. I think the other thing we can say for sure, Dennis Schroeder and Gary Payton II are not coming back next year. So that is $22.1 million right there in expiring money. I mean, that right there would get you Vucevic, depending upon the draft compensation, by the way. Again, not advocating that you get Vucevic. Guys that are harder to deal are going to be Kyle Anderson, who has a couple of more years ahead, 8.7, 9.2, 9.6. And I think the 9.6 is not fully guaranteed for 26, 27, but he's got 9.2 for next year on the books. Buddy Hield has got 9.2, 9.6, and then a player option for 10. So that's not really a good deal. That doesn't look like a good deal at this point. But again, it's $9-10 million for a shooter, and that's locked in. I mean, he's somebody that can be thrown in to a deal, I think, to be sure. So Kyle Anderson and Buddy Hield less likely to get moved because they have more years on their deal. But between Schroeder and Payton, you've got 22.1. Kevon Looney, add him to the mix, $8 million. Kevon, as much as everybody loves him, he's not coming back. At least wouldn't project to be in the plans. Now, would Steve Kerr want him back? Absolutely. Is he somebody that would take more of like a minimum deal around the $2-3 million mark? Possibly, but you could also move him and then bring him back in the offseason as a free agent if you wanted to bring him back in the offseason as a free agent. So I'm just doing the quick math here. I mean, that's 20. That is $30 million in expiring salary. Obviously, Kuminga is somebody you're going to look to have to extend at this point. Lindy Waters, $2.1 million. So you've got about roughly $32 million in expiring contracts that you could package parts of to try and acquire a player. And again, the Warriors are right up to the hard cap at the first apron, so they can't take back more. I mean, they're in the hundreds of thousands in terms of what they could take back more than they would send out. So again, the math has to be pretty tight as it relates to all of that. But to me, you should not let those expire. You should look to make a move at a minimum that adds somebody that extends the slot. And again, maybe it's 3 players for one, maybe it's 2 players for one, and so you in turn are opening up playing time for somebody currently on the roster because you're trading 2 and you're bringing back 1, and you're also extending the life of that roster spot by having somebody that's going to be under contract for next year. Now, you don't want to go too far down the road as far as many, and then that player can be put into a deal in the offseason that can maybe go get you a star in terms of the salary matching. So I think there's a huge, huge huge benefit in the Warriors looking to do that. If you decide you want to keep Schroeder, you've still got GP2's 9.1. You've still got Looney's 8. I mean, that's 17.1 plus Lindy. You got about 19.2 in terms of money that you can look to use to send out. So I think the Warriors should be looking around the league, and I'm sure they are, at players that have the potential to fit. Like, would you go get Bruce Brown? Would Bruce Brown be somebody that would fit? Potentially. I think he's in the second year he's making about 23. So again, the math may not work there, and he's got a team option, I guess, for, well, he picked that option. He's under contract. He's a unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. But, and again, I'm throwing a name out there. It's not specific to Bruce Brown, like he's some player that the Warriors have to go get. But I think he's somebody, there are players out there that, again, he would be expiring, but maybe he's somebody that you'd look to want to try to bring back. He's averaging 9 points per game and 36% on threes, and he's only played 11 games. He's been banged up, and that's been obviously an issue. Didn't play until December, and it basically is, didn't play till the end of December, and then has come back and played in a handful of games since then. But 18, 15, 17 in the last couple of games for Bruce Brown. Again, using him more as an example as you listen to KNBR 104.5 FM and 680 AM San Francisco, a Cumulus media station. We're into hour number 2 here. It's just Dubs on a Saturday here on KNBR, the sports leader. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line open as well. It's, do you look and scour the league? And the reason I use Bruce Brown as an example, you scour the league for somebody that you think has the potential to be a guy that you'd want to have on your roster next year as a role player. And you look at guys who are not going to be in the future plans next year, and you just try to figure out a way to shuffle the deck a little bit in that manner, as opposed to, Dennis Schroeder's 13 is just going to come off, and Peyton's 9-1 is going to come off. Like that. That is a useful tool to be able to add to the roster. And so at a minimum, I think the Warriors need to look to do that. Maybe that's how the Vucevic deal winds up coming to fruition. I think a lot of people were thinking that if it ends up being, basically a GP and a Looney combination, maybe with a Lindy Waters attached to that. And then, you're keeping Quentin Post, you're keeping Guy Santos, you're keeping Kuminga, you're keeping Moody, you're keeping Podziemski. Could Trace Jackson Davis be somebody that gets thrown in there if the Bulls are like, maybe we want TJD and his 2.2, 2.4 for the next couple of years? Like TJD would be somebody that also could potentially work in that deal if you're acquiring a big. I'd probably lean toward keeping TJD, even if you look to make a move for another big. Like, it's not necessarily give up on TJD time. It's just a matter of having a different type of a center that has a little bit of a different skill set that can get thrown into the mix there. But that's the one thing for me that's a must. We can talk about stars. We can talk about middling players. We can debate who's worth it, who's not. Should they give up first-round picks? That's fine. I'm okay with all of that. But you cannot just allow for those salaries to go away and not attempt to bring a player back that could either be thrown into a deal in the summer or can be somebody that's a productive, young prime type of vet. And again, it's not necessarily going to be a player that, it's a player that's fallen out of favor maybe with the team that they're on, or another team wants to clear the house a little bit in terms of their own salary situation. But I think that's a way on the margins to improve your roster without necessarily having to go out and do something extreme. It's not Jimmy Butler. It's not Zion Williamson. It's not some of the guys that are, don't exist. So we'll see what the Warriors ultimately look to do there. But I think at a minimum, they have to evaluate those spots specifically. Schroeder's 13. Is he going to be the backup point guard for the last 2 months or not? Is he good enough? Is that a role that Brandon Podziemski could take over? And if Brandon Podziemski can take over that role, it opens up maybe a little bit more time at the 2 for someone that will open up more time for somebody else to play some backup 3. Like, does that mean Moody could play more 2 with Hield? And it allows Guy Santos to be more of a backup 3 to Wiggins. And again, like I said, I don't think Kyle Anderson's a useful enough player to where I do think somebody would take him, but you're taking Kyle Anderson back for 9.2 next year as well, which isn't a crazy number. But I think Buddy Hield's got basically 3 more years on his deal at 9.2, 9.6, and 10.0 with a player option for that 27-28 year, if he wants to take it. So those are the guys. Again, Anderson and Hield, no, but I think Schroeder, Payton, Looney, and even Lindy Waters, if it's somebody that would, if it's an amount that would allow a deal to be consummated, is something that the Warriors are going to have to look at. In the YouTube chat, Atco Pest Control. JD, would you entertain trading Draymond Green to the Nets for Ben Simmons? Expiring, then you have Ben, Schroeder, GP Loon, all expiring to open cap space. Well, that's the flip side to the cap space issue. You don't really have cap space unless you would look to do that. I don't see why the Nets would want that. Like, why would the Nets want a couple of more years of Draymond Green under contract as opposed to just having Ben Simmons expire? So I don't think the Nets would necessarily want to do that. And again, the Warriors are not looking to move Draymond Green at this point. Like, that's just it. Could it get to? I think we're a year away from that. I think we're a year away from that conversation when he would have 1 year left on his deal. I don't think that would be a dramatic shift. I think the Warriors are still looking at Steph, Draymond, Steve Kerr as the foundation. Got to go get a second star. Some of these bench guys that they've signed are still going to be around. I think some of the young players are still going to be around. And then you make some determinations in the offseason on what do you do with Wiggins? What do you do with Kuminga? How do you facilitate getting that second scorer and or star into the mix? But that's what the likelihood that now you end up in this same position next year or worse. And Steph's got 1 more year left on his deal. Draymond's got 1 more year left on his deal. I think at that point, you start to entertain the notion of maybe looking to move on from Draymond Green. But I don't think we're there yet. And again, I don't get the impression that the Warriors are looking for this massive, let's try to clear up some salary cap space and, go sign somebody that isn't out there necessarily to be signed in terms of free agency. Our buddy Andis Brown, Warriors have to be careful. The Spurs are hanging around. Really bad if they don't even make the play-in. Yeah, I mean, disappointing if you make the play-in and end up bounced again like you did last year. But somebody's going to be on the outside looking in as you look at the standings. And right now it's the Warriors and the Spurs. I mean, I look at this, and I mean, Oklahoma City's Oklahoma City. Houston and Memphis, Houston and Memphis are 15 games over 500. Houston and Memphis could both play 500 the rest of the way and win 48 or 49 games by just playing 500. So I think they're in the top six. Denver is probably the second best team in the conference. I would trust Denver over Houston and Memphis. And I think at this point we're headed to a Thunder Nuggets conference finals, assuming they don't end up 1-4. I hope they don't. I hope they don't. I hope it shakes out. If it ends up being the top four, I hope it shakes out where Denver plays Houston or Memphis and Oklahoma City plays Houston or Memphis in the second round. I hate it when the top two teams end up playing each other because the standings are wonky. The top two teams play each other in the conference semifinals. I hate that, especially when it's a year where, like, clearly, in my mind, clearly Denver's better than Houston and Memphis. So I would like to see them separated. So I hope Denver can get to 3 at least to split that up a little bit. But that's a selfish ask at this point. But I think Houston and Memphis are in. Lakers and Clippers, we'll see. I mean, the Lakers and Clippers right now are in a good spot, 5th and 6th. I think they're making the top 10, though, both of those teams. I'll say that. I think Dallas and Minnesota are making the top 10. I think Phoenix is probably going to get Jimmy Butler in the next 2 weeks. So I think they're making the top 10. As maligned as they've been, and you know, they are the team that the Warriors don't want to be in terms of the cap purgatory and future picks. And, you know, every time the Warriors say, hey, we don't want to give up our assets, and that's what loser organizations do. Every time the Warriors players say that, I feel like they're taking a shot at the Suns. But if you're telling me the Suns in 2 weeks are going to have Booker and Durant and Jimmy Butler, I think the Suns are going to make the top 10. And right now they're leading the Warriors by a thread. And so if you go through all of that, if you say OKC, Houston, Memphis, Denver, Lakers, Clippers, Dallas, Minnesota, Phoenix are in, that's 9 teams. That's 9 teams. And as to your point, so you basically have Sacramento, who the Warriors have lost to twice now, and the Warriors don't have the division record tiebreaker either on them. The best the Warriors can do is tie the Kings by beating them a couple of times head-to-head here next month and in March. You start looking at tiebreakers and the like. But the Warriors are 1-7 in the division. I mean, Warriors are 1-7 in the division. Kings are 4-6. So you're gonna end up losing a tiebreaker to Sacramento. So it's basically the King. If you view it as those teams that I mentioned, those 9, it's basically the Kings, Warriors, and Spurs for one spot. And 2 of those 3 teams are going to wind up out. So it's not just San Antonio, but also potentially Sacramento and maybe Phoenix. Again, I think Dallas gets Luka back. I think Minnesota's going to do something where they end up improving, probably trading Randall, and end up in the top 10, even though if they're either one of those teams are in the play-in tournament, it's a massive, 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 massive disappointment. So, yeah, I mean, it's hanging by a thread without a doubt for the Warriors. Alex, why would Minnesota be down? Well, Minnesota's down because they traded Cat for financial savings. And not that he's some great player, but he's better than Julius Randle. And Julius Randle's completely taken him out of whack. You know, getting DiVincenzo was nice. DiVincenzo's hurt. I was thinking about this, Kyle. I know we're up against it, but I was in watching Minnesota of late because they've played the Warriors a bunch, and I've seen a couple of their other games. Who's their second scorer. Yeah, crickets.
DiVincenzo?
Yeah.
It's definitely not Julius Randle.
Jaden McDaniels. Like, I mean, I guess technically it's Randall, but he stinks.
Oh no, he stinks. His efficiency is so bad.
I mean, you talk about a guy, I joke about Kuminga, like the way he gets his is not in the flow of what the Warriors do. I mean, Julius Randle's the most extreme version of that, maybe on any team. Like, they just do not want to play the way that he forces them to play. And so, and then he gets his numbers, but it doesn't fit. And so, yeah, I think they're going to look to move him. But I'm thinking, well, God, why is Minnesota basically the same record as the Kings and the Warriors and Phoenix and all these other teams? And then it kind of dawned on me, of all of these teams, of all the teams at the top, I say at the top, in the top 10, 11, 12, all of them basically have two guys at least. Even the Kings, it's Sabonis, Fox, or they have DeRozan even. Like, it's just Booker and KD. Like, all these teams have it. Davis and LeBron. Clippers may be a little iffy. I mean, Kawhi had barely played, and they have Harden. But Minnesota really doesn't have it at the level that those other teams have it. And I think when you don't, it immediately puts you at a disadvantage. Andis Brown, new car smell past couple of games with Guy Santos and Quentin Post playing. It has been, but it has been a little refreshing. I'm not going to lie. The Dubs OT shows, we love our Dubs OT community, but the combination of the loss to Toronto and the discussion about whether or not they were going to give up on the season, the stench of that last week. And yeah, they came back and beat Minnesota, and then Steph Curry scolded everyone, but underwhelming, ugly win against Washington. You get beat by 40 against Boston. I mean, the extension of all of that, on top of the debate as to, well, maybe the best thing is shut it down. Maybe the best thing to do if you're the Warriors is not make the playoffs. You got 40 games left, and it's ugly as hell. Even in wins, it's ugly. You're holding on to a 24-point lead to win by 1 at Minnesota. You're losing to Toronto. You're barely beating the 6-win Wizards. Kind of put them away in the final 6-7 minutes, but that game was that game felt like the Warriors could lose it as it was being played. You get destroyed by Boston. Defending champs, had everybody loaded, but that's the best by far Boston's looked in a month. They haven't been themselves, but were themselves fully against you. And so the last 2 games have been refreshing. Crazy. I mean, the bar is low, but playing as well as they did against the Kings, despite the fact that the turnovers completely wrecked the game, and having a little bit of life after a horrible start against Chicago to turn that game into a blowout, because that game looked worse than the Wizards game initially. They were down 20-6. They're 26 to Chicago. You're thinking, damn, are they going to lose this game? So yeah, I mean the new car smell, Andis, the new car smell hadn't been so bad. And the way that the Warriors have played has made it not maybe so bad as in terms of, yeah, they're still winning. They're still splitting every 2-game stretch. I mean, they're still mid, they're still 500. And if this team were to lose 2 games in a row at any point, and it's funny, you look how it's set up, like they could lose tonight, but they should beat Utah at home because Utah is so bad. So you're 500 again. But it's like at any point, if they get 2 under, and I've said, at any point, if this team gets 2 under right now, it feels like they're on the brink of punt. They get 3 under. Like, I feel like if they get to 3 under, they might punt. Like, it's not get to 6 under or 8 under. Like, to me, it just, every time they've been 1 under, you lose one of these weird ones to Washington or Chicago or Utah and aren't winning the other ones, you're in big, 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 big trouble immediately. But that being said, Quentin Post and Guy Santos have brought a little life, as much as I chuckle when I say it. 808 KNBR, 415-808-5627. We got a couple of calls here. Let's keep it going here because we do have a couple of people that want to talk. Jack is up first here this segment in Pioneer. What's going on, Jack?
Hey, how you doing? Thanks for taking my call.
You got it, brother. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I want to talk about something that you were refreshingly explicit on. I called in about a month ago, and I think I was talking to Dickinson, and I just basically
that would be me.
Oh, that's you? Well, I'm glad that you came to your senses. Because you told me that, the Warriors are happy with their center position and stuff like that, and I just couldn't believe what you said. And I'm trying to be diplomatic here. Bottom line is any 5-year-old could see that the offensive strategy of the Warriors was, motion offense and make the threes and try to play good defense. Well, that may have happened back in the.
Oh, Jack, are we losing you?
No, I'm here.
Okay. Yeah, well, you were cutting out. Go ahead. Continue.
Yeah.
Continue insulting me, Jack.
That's okay. You could do the same. So when the championship years of the Warriors, they played the 3-ball. They had the motion offense, but they also had dominant, I would say almost dominant centers to augment when the Warriors were off not hitting threes. So what did Kerr do? Or what did the front office do? All they did was, we're going to still, stand fast with our 3-ball strategy, motion offense. Well, you didn't have any centers. You didn't have the David West. You didn't have the Zaza Pachulia. You didn't have Bogert. You didn't have any of those guys. I contest that the best center, that unfortunately should be playing more, but he's too old, is Kevon Looney.
Yeah, I would agree.
Davis, Jackson Davis is good. He's a role player. He's not a starting center.
He's also 6'8". He's also 6'8", and Looney's 6'9" also. But I hear what you're saying on that.
All right. Well, let me just finish up. Then you can go ahead and insult me. Okay. So they drafted Wiseman, and it looks like they got cold feet because that experiment failed. So if you're a big boy and you admit you're accountable, but you want to be competitive in this league, you take another shot and you try another big guy, or you try to get rid of some collateral to get a big center, or even a power forward, for God's sake. I'm not asking for much. Allen Wiggins is very good, but he is no power forward. You have no power forwards in there to say. Draymond Green taking threes, please. He shouldn't be in that position. Draymond Green.
Well, Draymond's a power forward, and Kuminga's a power forward. In today's NBA, that's the position for those guys. Like that in today's NBA, like the Karl Malones and the Tim Duncans and the guys like that playing the power forward position. Sean Kemp, back in the day, like those guys. Those aren't power forwards now. In fact, a lot of power forwards now are guys like Guy Santos that are shooting threes. Cam Johnson. Guys like that. As well, but I'll hear you on the center part. That part I will hear you on.
Okay. Well, no, I get where you're going with today's NBA. So I guess the bottom line is, it was so refreshing that you just said in your beginning monologue, kind of, is that Kerr was basically almost pleading for a stretch, 5 or 4, and I said, thank you. There is a God that he finally recognizes. Or maybe he's always recognized that you need both. You need motion offense, 3-pointers, pass the ball around, everybody touches the ball, everybody scores. But you also have intimidating centers or power forwards that will play defense and score down low score on a 2, score on a 3 even. So I'm just hoping Kerr isn't stubborn, because sometimes great coaches don't change, and then they become good coaches, or unfortunately.
Yeah. Jack, I'm going to jump in here because I'm going to jump in just because we're up against a break here. I want to give somebody, a few others on the phone lines, an opportunity. Thank you for the call. Look, the Warriors organization knows that they needed a stretch big. I think, when I say they're happy with their center position, it's who are you going to go get? Like, I think a lot of times people, view you need a big man as you need a big bruiser that's going to score in the post. And like, that's not truly what the big man is in today's NBA. Now, do the Warriors not have any 7-footer other than Quentin Post on their roster? No. And that's not a good thing. And to anybody's point that said, they had those guys when they were winning at a much higher level, even if they were role players and not dominant players, you still had at least one of them. But the stretch big and the stretch 5 is something that everybody has known that they need it. They just haven't gone and gotten it, and I think it's less necessary that they have it if they had another wing or two that could shoot the ball like that. They really don't have wings that can shoot it. They have guards. They don't have wing. They don't have 3-4 guys that can shoot it either. And I don't consider Wiggins a shooter. Like, Wiggins is, some nights Wiggins is hot, some nights Wiggins is cold. His overall numbers say he's capable enough. But what I'd love to see is Wiggins playing with somebody who really can shoot it, next to him, or Kuminga playing with somebody that really can shoot it next to him. If you're not going to have that wing player, then you need to have the big man that can do it even more so. And so, Quentin Post has been somebody that, I think, it's been a revelation, because even at the level that Quentin Post is in his NBA career, just starting out on a 2-way deal, 24-year-old, going to be 25-year-old rookie, you see the impact of just the body type and the skill set. So I think that's 100% fair. And I'm not gonna ridicule or our guy. So no, appreciate the call. All right, let's take a timeout. We'll get Hans in Santa Rosa coming up after the timeout, and more from the YouTube chat as we roll on here toward noon. And Bill Lasky's got a special edition of Extra Innings coming up then. But right now, it's just Dubs with JD here on the Sports Leader.
Just Dubs with John Dickinson keeps rolling. Streaming live on YouTube at KNBR 1045.
I was actually on the phone with Rick Smith 2 days ago. He gave me some words of encouragement. I mean, he's kind of the, how do you say that? Like, he's kind of the, the GOAT of the Netherlands, so, yeah. But then from a young age, I always looked up to Dirk Nowitzki. Started playing basketball in 2011 when he won the championship. He kind of set the standard for European tall players like me.
Couple of good names there, Rick Smits and Dirk Nowitzki. Quentin Post, after his career game against Chicago, back here, Just Dubs with JD, John Dickinson, 808 KNBR is the number. Paul in the YouTube chat, I didn't know Post is 24 years old. He's ready for some run. Yeah, he's going to be 25 in March. So he is an older rookie to be sure, but there's something to be said for some of those older rookies that are more experienced in college, that they're just more ready to make an impact. Maybe the ceiling isn't quite as high, but the floor is. And, Quentin Post taking an opportunity to, this first couple months of the year to try and figure out NBA defense and how to position himself in the right spots and not get completely cooked, I think is part of the reason. And in addition to the Warriors' depth as to why he didn't see the floor, as many two-way players don't see the floor as much in the early part of the year, but ready now to at least contribute, and we'll see how far he can take this thing. Hans in Santa Rosa, as we get back to the phones here, we'll get to the Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line in a moment. Hans, though, is next here on the Sports Leader. Hey, Hans.
Hello, how are you?
Doing well. What's on your mind?
I've been a Warriors fan since before the Rick Barry championships.
Sure.
And I think the reality now is that they're not a championship team. There's virtually no way they'll be a championship team next year or the year after. It's time to trade Curry, get a bunch of number ones, hopefully to San Antonio, but whatever. Move Draymond off. He'd love to go play down in LA. That's okay. And pick the young core and start rebuilding.
Well, you're touching on something, Hans, and we got a rough connection with you, but we'll keep you here for just a second. You're touching on something that I think under any other circumstance, had this team not won as many titles as they had with Steph and Draymond, I think under any other circumstance where the organization is speaking the way that they spoke 2 weeks ago about, hey, this team doesn't have it and it's not worth, risking anything to try and make it better in the short term in terms of the long-term future. Any other organization in that position that doesn't have an all-time great in Steph and another guy who's been such a huge key part of the success in Draymond, I think it would be a bigger part of the conversation. But where are you on this in terms of Curry wants to stay, and for everything that Curry has brought to this franchise, the dominance of the last decade plus, again, top 10 player of all time, does he deserve the right to want to stay? Like, in essence, would he need to give his blessing to leave or ask out in your mind?
He has to decide whether he wants to be a one-team player or take a shot at winning another championship. That's up to him. It's been a nice run. And if they're going to...
So what do you do if he says, I want to stay and ride it out? What if you say, you know what, maybe we can't win a title, but I want to stay and ride it out for these last 2 years of my contract, 2 years after this year?
Well, reality is, if he wants to stay, they'll let him stay. He's still a draw, still going to bring fans in. They're just not going to be a great team. And they're just going to put off becoming a great team for a couple more years.
Yeah, fair. I think you're spot on, Hans. Thank you for the call. Appreciate it. Again, it is a unique situation, and nobody's I'm not advocating trading Steph Curry or anything like that. But if this was that, if the Warriors truly, and I think the Warriors are trying to line up to take one more shot. I know it's frustrating to look at the way this team has performed on top of the way the team performed last year, on top of 2 years ago, and not be incredibly frustrated by, well, now the best chance is summer of 25, when it was supposed to be summer of 24, when a lot of people would have hoped that it would have been summer of 23. or the deadline last year when you could have looked to move Kuminga potentially for somebody like Pascal Siakam, and they didn't ultimately do that. So I understand the frustration of, oh, it's going to be this summer and then it's not, and it's going to be deadline the next year and it's not, and it's going to be the last summer and it's not, and it's going to be the deadline this year and it's not, and now it's a month plus before the deadline, it's like, well, this team's not worth salvaging. Sorry, it's going to be the summer. Like, that being said, I do think the Warriors are lining up one more shot at trying to use their assets in an attempt to get that number 2 and still have, some semblance of some depth around that player, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and if Wiggins and Kuminga are here or not. I don't think all of those guys, Wiggins and Kuminga, necessarily would be both around, depending upon the player that the Warriors would look to acquire, and maybe some future first-round draft capital wouldn't be around. But are you going to be good enough to where for 2 or 3 years you can offset the fact that you maybe won't be giving up that draft capital? And again, teams are going to want post-Steph picks. Like, that's the other part. Like, I think the Warriors can say, hey, we'll move 25 and 27's picks or 26, 28 picks. And, but because if the Warriors are good enough, those picks aren't going to matter as much. And they'll have their picks when Steph's gone, say 28 and beyond. But what teams are going to want is like 28 and 30. They're going to want when the Warriors are really bad, make a bet, kind of like the Spurs made a bet with that pick we were talking about earlier, that the Kings are going to be terrible in 2031, and that the Spurs are going to have Victor Wembanyama in his prime, maybe already having won a title in 6 years. And then you're going to get a lottery pick that you can use to either get another star or maybe get the second of the Wembanyama timeline if it's a year where that player in 2031 is the extreme high end caliber. And we've seen the Spurs do this before. I mean, they've been lucky in that sense before, from David Robinson to Tim Duncan to even getting Wemby here. They've picked the right years to be awful and have it turn into franchise-changing 7-footers or 7'6" guys in the instance of Victor Wembanyama. So, but yeah, the Warriors are in a spot where I do think they're still lining it up to make one more run in the offseason, and then a year from now at the deadline and or the summer of 2026, I think that's more when it starts to get into the realistic tear it down to the studs type of a conversation with Steve's contract up and then Steph and Draymond coming to the final year of their deal. 510, couple on the Golden State Lumber and Building Materials text line. 707, taking exception to me saying that the Clippers don't have a legit number 2. Norman Powell's balling. Respect his name. I love Norman Powell, but I don't think of clear-cut number 2 player when I think of Norman Powell. That being said, Warriors would die to have Norman Powell. They would die to have Norman Powell right now. You imagine Kyle, can you imagine Norman Powell starting at the 2 right now next to Steph? I mean, that would be like, oh my God. Like the Warriors might be 5th in the West with Norman Powell.
Yeah, I was just about to say they might be a top 5-4 seed if they had Norman Powell or like a Devin Vassell. I always compare the two. I feel like they're very similar.
Yeah, very similar. I'm a big Norman Powell guy. But yeah, he's definitely not a second star, but he's playing very well. So I will put some respect on Norman Powell's name. And then the 510, taking exception to the center conversation from the past. It was never about the center. It was always about elite defense. Warriors always had elite defense during all those championships. They did. But the one thing that I've quibbled with, and I'm not downplaying the defense, they did have elite defense. The one thing that I always quibbled with in the positionless era, where all these guys are interchangeable and they switch everything on. Yeah, the Warriors also had, at the points in which they were building, Steph Curry was a Hall of Fame point guard. Greatest shooter of all time, but Steph Curry's a point guard. And Klay Thompson might be the prototypical shooting guard of all time. And Harrison Barnes and Kevin Durant were the quintessential three starting small forwards in terms of position, but could guard up 3-4s. They were small forwards that were small ball 4s. And then you had Draymond, who was a power forward, who was a small ball 5. And you did have Bogut, and you did have Spates, who was, I think when he entered the league, more of a power forward, but Spates was a stretch big before stretch bigs were really a thing. And so you had different players with different skill sets, but the Warriors had a true 1, a true 2, a true 3, a true 4, a true 5. They did. For the entirety of those runs, they had positional integrity, and then they could switch everything and bring other guys. Iguodala could come in and they could go 1 through 5. But Iguodala, same thing. Iguodala was a 3 who could also play that 3-4 spot, who could also act as a point guard, a point forward in a lot of ways. So he had a true position, but then his game expanded dramatically beyond that position as well. So I do think there was some positional integrity there. All right, quick timeout. We'll come back. We'll wrap things up. We'll hand it off to Bill Lasky as he's going to be talking some Giants with you from noon to 2. Just Dubs with JD here on the Sports Leader.
We're back with more Blue and Gold. Just Dubs with John Dickinson. Now continues on the Sports Leader. Streaming live at KNBR.com and on the KNBR app.
I mean, really off the court, man. On the court, he's one of the greatest to ever do it. But I'll share a quick story, man. We came home. This is a few months ago, so I haven't even touched the court yet. We came home from a long road trip. I was up here, and I think it was like 2:30 at night, and we were at the airport, right? And I'm trying to get an Uber to go home, but the Uber service isn't working. Everybody's kind of leaving. IQP, you good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. Steph walks by, and Steph's like, are you good? I'm like, yeah, I'm good. I figured it out. And he's like, no, what do you mean? Like, how long I can get an Uber? And Steph's like, are you trying to go home? I'm like, yeah, I got you. So at 2:30 at night, maybe 3 o'clock, I don't know, whatever. Steph is like, I got you. And he drove me home. He made a little detour. And, that just shows, how he is as a person. And at that point, probably out of the 50 people that were on that airport, Steph was the last person that needed to worry about if I got home, But that's just the person he is.
Great story from Quentin Post after the game on Thursday night. Warriors beat the Bulls, and what a guy, what a teammate that Stephen Curry is, making sure that his guy ends up getting home. A rookie, a guy that's on a two-way contract, shuffling between the G League and back, and Steph making sure that he got a ride home. Just you hear the things about Steph like that make you think he's that guy, and that's another one in a long line. I mean, Steph is that guy, generous with the rides. And so, you could tell that the Warrior veterans do like Quentin Post. I mean, Draymond was going on. I remember being back in Hawaii during training camp, and Draymond was talking about how Quentin Post was, there's a physicality to him. You've heard Kevon Looney talk about how he's got a little bit of a mean streak to him. So if they thought he was soft and couldn't hang, you wouldn't be hearing a lot of those types of discussions, especially from somebody like Draymond, who's, Draymond doesn't do soft, especially when it comes to big men. And so maybe even being around Draymond as well. I think that's something you've either got it or you don't. And, you're either leaning soft or you're not. And I think, Post maybe not leaning soft, and then you get with Draymond a little bit, and that helps you understand where you can end up being more physical in the league. I think that can be beneficial toward him going on to having an NBA career. Final segment here. It's just Dubs with JD before we get it to Bill Lasky. Final 5-6 minutes as the Warriors and the Lakers tonight. And again, we've seen a lot of our regulars in the chat, but also some newbies in the YouTube chat here this morning on KNBR. And if you like what you hear, we do this after every Warriors game as well. Dubs OT tonight, and we do it for the Warrior home games from Harmonic Brewing in Thrive City. We go live immediately following each and every game. Kyle Harr will be back. I may be having a brew. I got the coffee going this morning, but maybe having a brew out at Harmonic there in Thrive City, right next to Chase Center. And we'll be talking some Warriors basketball as the homestand continues, and LeBron and Anthony Davis in to take on Steph and the Warriors tonight in Saturday night ABC showcase game. And then Utah, OKC, Phoenix, and Orlando, the remaining games on the 6-game trip, with the Warriors 1-0 on the 6-game homestand, rather, before the 6-game trip that comes up over the trade deadline and leading up to All-Star Weekend, which is also going to be in San Francisco coming up here in 3 weeks. Let's close things out with a lot from the YouTube chat. Erwin Kwong, great to see you in there. At the very least, it's clear Post can drop an open three, and that is huge. Just the ability to do that is massive. He needs to be a better rebounder, though. Putting on mature girth could help with that. The other thing he does, too, is he fouls a ton. He fouls a ton, but that's okay. Again, we're viewing this, at least I am, under the lens of backup big man. Can he be a capable backup big man? And really, in today's NBA, you need in a lot of ways, you need three different kinds of big men. You need a rim running dunker type big man that can protect the rim. You need a stretch big as well. And, at least those two types, and at least those two types. And then you need kind of a guy that can get out and defend a little bit on the perimeter as well. Somebody that's a more switchable five. And, you would like if you have someone that can do all of those things, but there are very few, and score in the post and all of that, but there's so very few bigs that even really do that at this point that it becomes less of a commodity. But I think if you are going to have three bigs, you want those bigs to have complementary skill sets. And so, I think a post type player with a Looney type player and a TJD type player, assuming TJD was a little bit of a better finisher, that could be a decent combination. You wish I think TJD was a little taller. I think that would help some of the finishing. Still kind of an undersized center, but a center nonetheless, more in the 6'8" range as opposed to the true 7-footer, which is what Post is. Andis Brown, Steph loves playing with him. Steph's been starving for a stretch 4 or 5 so he can operate with more space. Yeah, he's had both lately with Guy. I mean, Guy Santos has been playing some 4. Sometimes he's been out there at 3 with Moody. It's kind of been a combination. Moody's been at the 4. They've sort of fluctuated a little bit more lately. But, when Moody's hitting and when Guy Santos is hitting at that 3-4 spot, it opens everything up. So, yeah, it definitely winds up being important. And so I think you look at the way things are shaping up and, it's if those guys are the guys that can fill those roles, that's great. If not, then you're seeing the value in acquiring those kinds of players. Woodpit 420, what up, JD? That from earlier on. Yeah, what up, Woodpit? Good to see you. I guess Loom will be back in some aspect. Yeah, I don't know. We could see. Suns always seem to find a way out of it. We were having the conversation about the Suns earlier and their willingness to continue to spend money and then also double and triple down as well on not giving in and believing that they have to tear things down to the studs. Woodpit, Kuminga can't play small forward. Yeah, there was somebody in the chat that said, hey, you want Kuminga to play the 3 and Wiggins at the 2. If you have a stretch big, you can be more apt to do that. But again, I think we're at a point where, at this point, Kuminga at the 4 when he comes back is probably the way the Warriors are going to go. All right, that's going to do it. Great show today. Appreciate everybody in the YouTube chat as well. And we'll talk to you tonight for Kyle Haar and Raf Corral. Excellent work. Bill Lasky is coming your way next, a special edition of Extra Innings, as he'll be taking your calls and talking some Giants offseason, Giants Fan Fest tour ongoing down in the South Bay. And Lasky's going to be all over that coming up next right here. We'll talk to you tonight on Dubs OT on the Sports Leader.